Hey everyone, before we get started on this tutorial, I wanted to mention that I created a Facebook modeling group for scale modelers who use acrylics. I noticed that whenever scale modelers who use acrylics reach out on other Facebook groups for advice, they don't really get advice. They get a lot of people just commenting about how acrylics suck and how they should switch to lacquers, etc., etc. And I don't find that helpful at all. I'm an acrylic user because I have to be an acrylic user. I used to be a lacquer user. Due to health issues, I cannot use lacquers anymore, so I switched to acrylics. Now that I understand acrylics, I really enjoy them, and I like helping people understand how to use acrylics, but I'm finding over and over again that it becomes a situation of just constant belittlement when you ask for advice if you're an acrylic user. So I'm hoping with this group, we acrylic users can help other acrylic users. This group is open to all types of modelers, and I really hope you will consider joining. Thank you. For this tutorial, I'm using a 1/48 scale Spitfire cockpit, which is painted in black. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to dry brush the cockpit, and I'm using a light gray here. You don't want to use a white. White is a little too stark. So you want to use a light gray instead. And what I'm doing is I'm removing about 98% of the paint, and then I'm using a flat brush just to hit the raised edges of the cockpit, which are the dials, and they will show through by doing this. And I'm not going in straight, I'm going in at an angle. You want to make sure your brush is going in at an angle to get all those dials and not just flood the cockpit with paint. So as you can see, I'm just lightly touching the raised edges. And the more I do this, the more I'm going to bring out the dials. And remember to change the angle of your cockpit, like I have, because you want to make sure you hit it from all different sides and get those dials really shown through. Time for detail painting. And here I'm using something kind of unique, and I don't think a lot of modelers use it, and that is a wet palette. I discovered this particular tool while watching videos of figure modelers, and they use wet palettes all the time because they do a lot more brush painting than us airplane guys do. And a wet palette is a game changer. It keeps the paint moist and manageable, and just makes it 10 times better for your needs. In fact, I've seen them use it to paint entire models. So if you're a modeler who's not comfortable airbrushing and you want to use hairy sticks, get yourself a wet palette. This will really help with your model painting. Here, as you can see, I'm just using the wet palette, adding a little bit of water, and then going ahead and just coloring in what I need to color in on this cockpit. For the yellow, I did not thin it. Yellow is very opaque to begin with, so thinning it down with water is kind of pointless. So I'm just going to use it straight and kind of lightly touch the buttons that I'm trying to paint. And with yellow, always remember, because of how opaque it is, you have to build it up. You probably will have to do maybe 2-3 passes and then let it dry, and then maybe another 2-3 passes just to kind of get that yellow look to it, or it's going to look really very soft. Now with the white, I'm going to go in and hit some of those buttons. And the reason I'm doing that is I want a little bit of contrast between the white and the light gray of the dials. So I want the buttons to pop through a little bit more. Again, this is not how real cockpits look, but again, it's a model, and you kind of want it exaggerated because a lot of this will be toned down when you put on your flat coat. So as you can see, the white stands out a little bit more than the gray there. And I'm just going to hit a few buttons and dials just to kind of give them a little bit more life to them, and that's really about it. If you look on the real Spitfire cockpit, it doesn't really have raised details it has recessed dials, bezels, and so this is kind of a just inaccurate, but it's a model, and it's not going to be fully accurate. If you really want to be accurate and get something precise, I think the only alternative is the new 3D printed cockpit decals. They seem to be the most realistic and accurate. A lot of these buttons, a lot of this dials don't even seem very accurate based on pictures I've seen of the Spitfire Mark V. So if you really want to go for accuracy, then get yourself those decals. But for painting wise, this is going to make your cockpit stand out. It's going to make everything look nice and just, put a little oomph in your cockpit. Now, I'm getting ready to correct some of the dry brushing that got a little out of hand. And what I'm going to be using is a technique, again, I learned in the figure modeling community using glaze medium. Glaze medium, what it does is it makes the paint a translucent, almost like an ink. And by doing that, I can come in and blend in some of the errors or where I got a little bit too aggressive with the paint. And it just makes it a little bit nicer and tidier instead of using water. Water doesn't really do that. Glaze medium does. It makes it translucent but also very nice coverage. The other thing I've been using glaze medium is to create weathered effects. If you use glaze medium on, for example, seats or something and dab on different paints with the glaze medium, it makes them look very worn and used, and a very nice effect can be created. So this is something you should definitely get in your arsenal if you're an acrylic modeler. But as you can see, a few touch-ups here, and it makes the paint a little bit worn in those areas. I know you can't tell, but it really does add a little nice worn effect. Time to put a gloss coat on the cockpit to get ready for weathering. And what I'm using here is aqua gloss at 15 psi, and I'm adding in about 3 light coats. It's a very strong varnish. Once the aqua gloss was dried, I added in the kit provided cockpit decals. And what I'm doing here is adding a filter. And the reason is I actually ended up not liking the decals provided for the cockpit. So I wanted to add in a little bit of variation using a filter. And you can take Vallejo model washes and turn them into a filter by thinning them a lot. And that's what I did here. And the filter, a blue filter on a black background, will change the tone of the black slightly into a more muted black and add just a little bit of variation. It's nothing too extravagant. You can also add in a wash. For a black background, you want to add in a light gray wash. Unfortunately, I'm out of light gray at this moment, so I didn't do that. So I just decided to do the filter. But you could, at this stage, choose to do a wash, a filter, or both, and create some really amazing effects. And again, this is coming from the Spanish school of modeling. They do a lot of this stuff to make everything pop, and I really like that. Time to add in a flat coat, and I'm using Vallejo Premium Urethane Flat Finish. Thinned at 50-50 and shot at 15 psi. It's going to go on wet, and it's going to look a little wet. Give it a little bit, and it will come back to a nice flat finish. Another easy little trick you can do is to simulate glass on the dials of the cockpit, and you can use that by using whatever gloss you have available to you. And you want to make sure first you decant the gloss into a container. Never put your brush into the bottle of gloss. Your brush can be dirty and you never know it. Once you've decanted it, you can take the brush and just dip into the dials some of the gloss, and once it dries, it will simulate glass, and it adds a little bit more realism to the cockpit. Here is the final result of the cockpit. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful to you, and hopefully you learned something as well. I wanted to mention that a couple of things you should take away from this video if you're an acrylic user is the glazed medium is really amazing tool. It can really create some use worn effects. So as you can see on the seat of my Spitfire, that's what I use to create this worn effect on the seat. And also the wet palette is something you should really consider investing in if you're an acrylic user, because it just really helps with brush painting. I think a lot of the problem people have with brush painting acrylics is they dry too fast, and that really is solved by the wet palette. But you can get some amazing effects by using these techniques.